you were not against raising the minimum wage.
Not at all.
Against doubling it.
Well, I was against increasing it to the point where it kills jobs for working-class Americans. If you're killing jobs for people who need to get on the ladder of opportunity, if you're making it so low-skilled workers can't find a job, then you're acting contrary to what you claim you're trying to do. If you're not really trying to help those people by increasing the wage, you're trying to make a political point. So I've actually advocated for the Restaurant Association and the Franchise Association to get behind a minimum wage increase. But let's determine the point at which it starts to kill jobs.
All right, that was Donald Trump's first choice for Labor Secretary, explaining for the first time since he took himself out of the race why he did take himself out of that race and what he thinks of the landscape right now. Former Best Buy CEO Brad Anderson on all of that. Ultimately, it was his views on labor and the minimum wage that I think in the end did him in, particularly among unions who were never keen on him. What do you think?
Well, I think that unions had, I think that's part of it. I think unions had a lot of reasons to be worried about him because he was a pretty fresh and aggressive point of view that I think is reflected in that quote. And I think he authentically cares about what happens, especially with people who are in entrenched poverty and really trying to get more people. I was very excited about him stepping into the role because I think he really cared about getting a fresh outcome for people, not necessarily worried about the policy, but really getting at the outcome. And I think that quote is an illustration of that.
Do you think that whatever you think of the views on the minimum wage or machines taking over productions that humans used to do, that it will sort of dial back a little bit now? That I don't know much about Mr. Costa, of course, whose confirmation hearings start in a little less than a week. How he'll do, I assume he gets in unless there are some surprises. But that this idea of someone who will be aggressively kind of in labor's face, that is not going to happen. What do you think?
I think the last thing you want to do is unintentionally be in labor's face. I think when you look at the Trump,
I should explain. That's how it was interpreted. I should say that was how
yeah, but I think Donald Trump rises or falls based at the end of the day in how opportunity is distributed in this country and whether people who currently don't feel like they've got an opportunity are invited into the job market and see horizon for not minimum wage jobs but for real opportunity in their lives. So I don't really think at the end of the day the end objective between the Trump administration and labor is different. Their path to get there, or the way they see the path to get there, might be very different from the perspective. But so I think there's going to be some conflict. Some of it should be pretty healthy. But the key thing I'm looking for, is the person really committed to that outcome who's in that position? And I think he was, and I hope that happens with the next labor secretary.
We shall see. In the meantime, how do you think about 6 weeks or so into this President Trump is doing?
Well, the exciting thing is I think we're really seeing the beginning of growth of GDP. I think the optimism that you see from the average person and customers that we see reflected in surveys, some of the economic outcome we're starting to see, I think I see a little bit of it on some of the boards I serve on, looks pretty optimistic. So I think if we can keep a momentum going, this could be quite exciting.
I'm wondering what you're making of the tax cut debate and the caught up in the repeal and replace Obamacare is the fact that it's kind of joined up at the hip with the president's plan to aggressively cut taxes, comprehensive reform, and that could be delayed. Now, apparently Sean Spicer was just telling reporters, we believe that August timetable that Secretary Mnuchin over at the Treasury had told us last week to get tax cuts done and approved and signed into law, that still looks good, but people have their doubts, including Mitch McConnell. To you?
Well, I mean, this is always in the space. When you're trying to, with a country this size and with as many people that are impacted by things like, if you go all the way back to the Reagan administration, those tax cuts drove arguably a quarter century of economic growth. But there were some unintended consequences, like the savings and loans the collapse in the late 80s. When you're into the weeds on tax legislation, if you get a major component of it wrong, it could have a major negative effect on the economy. So I would expect, I think it makes sense you've got to get at the health care thing before you can get at the core of the tax legislation, and you cannot afford to make major mistakes here, especially with the size of deficits that we've been running.
Yeah, that's right. Brad Anderson, former Best Buy CEO, thank you.